Donald Trump, the former U.S. president, known for his unpredictable positions and controversial statements, returns to the center of attention with a statement he took to his surprised supporters. "I will send weapons again to Ukraine." This speech marks an unexpected turn for those who, for much of the conflict, adopted a critical tone for military support to the country invaded by Russia. But after all, what is behind this change? This is what we will analyze in this video, dividing the scenario into 3 blocks: internal context, international impact, and the backstage of global political chess. In the United States, Trump is once again campaigning. And as always, their speeches are millimeter calculated not to please the press or analysts, but to reach their electoral base and the strategic interests of the backstage. In 2022 and 2023, Trump was skeptical about American involvement in the Ukraine war. He even said that if he were in the White House, he would have resolved the conflict in 24 hours. Speech like this pleased a part of the Republican electorate, tired of long and expensive wars. But now, with 2024 knocking on the door, the game has changed. What happened? Trump realized that the neutral narrative, which worked well among ultra-conservatives, no longer supports its power project in international chess. The Republican Party is fragmented. There are nationalists who still support American isolation, but also military hawks politicians with direct bonds with the industrial military complex, who see support for Ukraine as a way to keep the United States as a dominant power and to ensure billionaire contracts with the arms industry. In addition, internal pressures within the party began to grow. Influential parliamentarians, especially senators with close relations with the defense sectors, have warned that an ambiguous posture in the war can weaken the U.S. image before its European and NATO allies. For Trump, who has always put himself as the strong and inflexible leader, this is a problem. Accepting the discourse of neutrality begins to seem a weakness, and weakness, in trickest logic, is unacceptable. Another essential point in this movement is the pressure of Ukrainian public opinion and pro-Uk lobbyists within the United States. Over the past 2 years, Kyiv has invested heavily in keeping the flame of international solidarity alive. Zelensky even made several strategic visits to Congress and the White House, and even remotely attended Western leaders' meetings. This has weight. Even in a polarized scenario, there is a significant portion of the American population, especially Democrats and independent, who sees in help to Ukraine a moral and defense of democracy. Trump realized that if he wants to regain undecided or moderate, he needs to show that he is not simply abandoning the West, especially when Putin, his informal adversary in the geopolitical theater, begins to gain ground in the international narrative. By saying that he will send weapons back to Ukraine, Trump tries to unite 2 seemingly contradictory ends: to maintain his image as a strong and nationalist leader, while not letting the United States seem complicit in Russian expansion. But there is still a decisive factor: the 2024 elections. The scenario is increasingly tight. Biden, despite facing criticism and falling popularity, is still competitive. Trump knows he needs a narrative of strength, strategy, and control. If the conflict in Ukraine continues to drag itself to the election period, as it seems to happen, Trump wants to be seen as the only one who can end the war, but with authority, and if necessary, with military power. Therefore, the change of discourse is not only rhetoric, it is electoral calculation, geopolitics, and political survival. And it seems that this will not be the only strategic change in the coming months. Trump plays to win, and for that, he is willing to rewrite his own speeches how many times they are necessary. Trump's statement that he intends to resume the sending of weapons to Ukraine was not just a nod for U.S. voters. It was also a direct message to the world, especially to 2 leaders who have their eyes constantly facing the United States: Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky. Trump's tone change rekindles tensions and forces all the board players to review their pieces. For Putin, American support to Ukraine has always been the main obstacle to a more aggressive advance in the conflict. Since 2022, the presence of state-of-the-art weapons sent by the U.S., such as HIMARS, Patriot air defense systems, and modern air defense systems, has been crucial to containing the Russian advance and, at times, forcing setbacks. When Trump showed skepticism regarding the sending of help, Kremlin saw it as a possible openness. The idea of a possible return of Trump to the presidency fueled, behind the scenes of the Russian government, the hope of a weakening of Western support to Ukraine. But now, with this speech, Putin finds himself facing a new scenario. Trump, even without being in the White House, begins to shape the speech of the American power, and this time is not of appeasement. It is of strength. The message is clear. Any hope of a U.S. military retraction is threatened. And the worst, for Putin, is that this speech can gain traction and even force Democrats to further radicalize their support for Ukraine so as not to look weak in the face of the new Republican stance. In this context, Trump's speech acts as a kind of thermometer for the future of war. If he, who was seen as a possible bridge between Moscow and Washington, begins to align with the idea of military strength, then there may be no room for easy negotiations. The conflict tends to extend and intensify. On the other hand, Zelensky receives the statement as a possible symbolic victory. After all, if to Trump, who has already flirted with Putin in the past and openly criticized the Ukrainian government, is reconsidering its position, it reinforces the legitimacy of Kiev's struggle. But there is a problem. Trump is not predictable. He can change his speech again if he finds it convenient. Therefore, Zelensky's diplomatic team needs to act with caution and strategy. The Ukrainian president will probably try to deepen ties with moderate Republican politicians, show that Ukraine is a stable ally and, of course, to maintain the war present in the American imagination as a combat between democracy and authoritarianism. And the geopolitical scenario doesn't stop there. Europe also observes carefully. Countries such as Germany, France, and the United Kingdom know that without the US, support for Ukraine loses power. Trump's speech creates a new type of momentary tactical alliance. Even European leaders who do not sympathize with him can find in his new posture an opportunity to reinforce joint support to Ukraine and press even more Moscow. Within NATO, this rhetorical repositioning also has an impact. Although Trump harshly criticized the alliance during his government, even threatening to leave the pact, now he speaks as someone who understands the strategic importance of maintaining American leadership in the West. It's as if he said, "I may not like NATO, but I know how to use it when it is convenient to show strength." And that, once again, shows that war in Ukraine is not just a territorial conflict, but a stage where the great leaders rehearse their global authority. In terms of practical consequences, financial markets, defense analysts, and even energy investors carefully follow these signs. The resumption of sending weapons indicates that war can extend further, which impacts supply chains, oil price, grain production, and strategic commercial routes. A simple speech can shoot actions from war companies or bring down scholarships in Eastern Europe. And finally, there is the internal impact on the United States. Trump's speech can force Biden to go even further in his own speech. The current president, who had been criticized for spending too much on an endless war, can now try to recover land by saying that even Trump acknowledges the importance of Ukraine. The result of this is a possible bipartisan consensus around military aid, something rare in the current scenario of American polarization. Briefly, Trump's simple announcement was like a diplomatic earthquake. He repositioned powers, exposed cracks, joined opponents, and confused allies. And what we don't know yet is what motivated this speech. What's behind the scenes? What kind of conversations were made away from cameras? Zelensky made any promise? Military lobby has pressured Trump more intensely? Behind the scenes of international politics, public speeches are rarely spontaneous, especially when it comes to someone like Donald Trump. His statement that he will send weapons again to Ukraine raises an inevitable question. Who has pressured Trump to change? And most importantly, what does he gain from it? To understand this turn, we need to look at the complex ecosystem that influences decisions of a former campaign president. One of the most relevant factors is the defense industry lobby, one of the most powerful and well-connected sectors in Washington. Weapons manufacturers like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and Northrop Grumman see the war in Ukraine as a geopolitical and financial opportunity. Each approved aid package means billions in contracts. With this in mind, it is not difficult to imagine discreet encounters, generous donations, and backstage conversations suggesting Trump that aligning his speech to the interests of these groups would be advantageous. In addition to the military lobby, there is also the influence of conservative think tanks, such as Heritage Foundation and the Hudson Institute, which has expanded the speech that the United States cannot let Ukraine be dominated at risk of opening precedents for China to do the same with Taiwan. These groups have direct channels with Trump's advisors and shape, silently, much of the geopolitical narratives in the Republican field. But there is yet another silent actor in this game: Volodymyr Zelensky. Despite the past tensions, including the famous episode of the quid pro quo between Trump and the Ukrainian government in 2019, which led to the former president's first impeachment, Zelensky understands how American game works. He knows that to secure support, it is necessary to go beyond traditional diplomacy. Therefore, sources close to the Ukrainian government speculate that there was direct movements to reconnect Trump of the Ukrainian cause. Some rumors indicate that discreet sent from Kyiv have kept conversations with Trump's allies, offering guarantees that in the future Republican government Ukraine will be a strategic partner in East Europe. Other rumors suggest more pragmatic promises: Ukrainian participation in commercial agreements, energy cooperation, and even facilitating agreements with companies linked to post-war reconstruction. The fact is that Zelensky knows he needs to secure support before 2024. If Trump returns to power, the scenario can change radically, for the better or worse. Therefore, anticipating a rapprochement and turning Trump into an ally even before your possible victory is a diplomatic chess play. And from what has been seen in the last speech of the former president, she may be working. But what do Putin think of all this? Certainly Trump's speech generated discomfort in Kremlin. Russia, which saw a possible breach in Republican victory to weaken the West, now needs to recalibrate its plans. Trump's statement dismantles, at least momentarily, the expectation of a milder White House. And this shake is significant because it reinforces the idea that the war can last, and worse, with renewal of Ukrainian firepower. In response, analysts believe Putin will intensify propaganda efforts, both inside and outside Russia. The idea is to paint the West, including Trump, like Marians of military lobby, transforming war not into a territorial conflict, but into a fight against the obscure interests of a global arms elite. This type of narrative strengthens Russian internal cohesion and allows Putin to maintain popular support, even in the face of sanctions and losses on the battlefield. But at the same time, he exposes the fragility of Moscow. The war is largely sustained in the expectation that the West will back down. If until Trump decides to move forward, this hope begins to die. And what can we expect from now on? From a military point of view, Trump's simple announcement is likely to cause practical reactions. Ukraine can accelerate heavier weaponry requests, predicting a possible window of opportunity before 2024. The US, even under Biden, can intensify war support to show that they have scenario control and to prevent Trump from using the theme as an electoral weapon. In the political field, we will see a growing dispute for those who are more strong against Putin. The narrative of force returns to the center of the debate, and any sign of weakness will be used as an electoral ammunition. For Trump, this is a way of shielding against accusations of collusion with the Russian regime. For Biden, it is a chance to reaffirm leadership. In the end, Trump did not change by moral conviction. He changed by strategy. He understood that support for Ukraine can give him power, influence, votes, and respect, both within the US and on the international stage. And if he needs to rewrite previous speeches, he will do so without hesitation. Because in the geopolitical game, ideology is worth a little. What matters is winning. And Trump, more than ever, is playing to win.